people are hiring a product to do a job. So like, what is that job the product is doing, and how important is that job to the person? And you better make sure that you're developing a product that has a very strong job to be done, because otherwise it's just going to be part of the rest of what's out there.
Hey everybody, this is Eve Eden.
I'm Brian Crowley. Welcome to UX Murder Mystery. And Eve, who do we have today on the show?
Yeah, so we have a treat for you guys. We are going to be talking to a COO. This is Jessica Murray. She is a professional COO who helps companies not only scale operations, but she also comes at it from a product strategy lens. Not only does she help early stage startups, but she also has experience in global public enterprises. With her experience across these industries, multi-industries, she can really help companies through their growth stages. She is also brings that multidisciplinary lens to building systems that not only work, but help companies evolve. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks for joining us. I'm curious to ask you, before we kind of like get going, how do you define UX? Because I have a feeling that maybe your definition is the first thing that maybe founders are struggling with.
Yeah, I define UX as thinking about every interaction a user is having with a product. And that, I think, going to your point about founder misconceptions, I think sometimes either founders or any stakeholders who aren't used to product development or design just think about the shiny veneer and like what you see as being the UI UX. Whereas really, I think someone who is a UX professional, or you're thinking about UX holistically, you're really thinking about all the interactions that a user is having with your product over time.
Yeah, great. So then with that, knowing you're from Nashville, I'm from Nashville, and you have been working with, different stages of where companies could be. Because this is a kind of a startup growth city, what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding about UX with founders?
Again, I don't know that it's that different from what I sort of just said, which is, I think sometimes people think of UX as this is what the app should look like, and this is what that button color should be. But oftentimes I think there might be a missed opportunity to really think about the end-to-end user flows and user journeys, not just the happy path, but all the edge cases, and really thinking about what that experience could and should ideally look like before you go through, development cycles and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's, I don't think it's that different from the answer to my first question, but I'd say those are probably some of the things I see is sort of like jumping over it before being super thoughtful about what the user experience and those user flows and user journeys, what you want them to ideally be, but also what could they be and what should they be based on the outcomes you're trying to drive.
So I'm curious to know, like, do we think, Eve and I have been having these kind of conversations about trying to educate the general public about UX, because a lot of, like, in the infancy of this profession, we have a lot of the general public doesn't understand or know what user experience is, UX. And I'm curious if that's part of the reason that the founders, people that are trying to start companies, are confused about this, and what might we do better to be able to communicate these ideas out to the general public?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I think it's tough because you have a lot of founders who aren't necessarily coming, to your point, from either a design or even a product background. They come with a problem that they want to solve or a wedge that they see that they can solve in a big market opportunity. And then they have to figure out how to make that come to reality. And they don't necessarily know what needs to happen for that to come to reality. Like if they're a first-time founder, if they've never been in technology around product development before. And so I think this is true of not just tech, but other industries. I think oftentimes we come at things from like a word salad or an acronym, landmine, and aren't explaining the why well enough to founders or different stakeholders around, why, building wireframes or going through like a user journey experience is super important. And so when you have a founder who is trying to rapidly get a product to market to solve a problem that they see as being a big industry problem to solve, and they know that competition is fierce and everybody is moving fast, you have to convince them why they need to slow down and think about something like this, and do it succinctly. And I think that's true of anything you're trying to convince a founder to do. But that could be part of it. Is a lot of founders don't come from this world, and so you need to educate them, but you need to educate them fast, and they need to understand the value of why they would invest in UX upfront, or anything for that matter.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jessica. You know what? To build on what you're saying, what do you think is like an easy pathway to help a founder understand that bring design into the beginning of the product life cycle, right? Like at really in the kind of idea stage, innovation stage. How have, in your kind of experience, how would you go about doing that if they are, let's say, an MBA that may have not really understood design strategy? What would you how would you start?
It's interesting. I almost think, like, if you think about who a founder goes to first, like, let's just say you have a business-minded founder or a visionary founder, and they're like, I need to build a thing. I think their first instinct, although these days maybe the first instinct is to go to a vibe coding platform, but like the first instinct is to find an engineer, right? Because like they think they need an engineer to build the thing, which is true. And so I think it actually comes from from that first person that they need to go to help them build. And that person needs to also help educate and say, okay, you want to build X. What problem are you trying to solve? Who are you trying to solve it for? And sort of suss some of that out. But then you're hopeful that that engineer that they're bringing in also understands the value of good UI, UX, good design process, good product development, and will help sort of bridge that for you, because I think it's harder to come in the outside when it's not like design is going to be the thing that like hard builds the product. And so a founder's like, well, who can build this thing for me? I need to build it. I need to move fast. I need to like get it out into the world. And so I think it's really about getting to those early stakeholders that a founder is engaging with or getting advice from, who can help be that bridge. And to be quite honest, like in the world that we're living in with AI and how much easier it is for someone to go from zero to prototype, I think even all of that is sort of changing and evolving. But that would be sort of my 2 cents on that topic.
I wonder if part of me has been wondering about the phrase design, and that when we've been using user experience for a long time, so user experience and design have been like locked together, but there are many UX professionals that are not designers at all. There are many UX professionals that are centered in research or centered in content design or writing. And part of me wonders if like design has been a little bit of a, using the word design has been a little bit of a of an albatross around the neck of user experience, and that it brings to mind colors and shapes and paint swatches, and so they start thinking about it in those terms as opposed to testing and validation and an experience.
Yeah, I would say that as well. Like, that's a great point, that it has been locked in with design. And so that goes back to my sort of like misconception thing at the outset, which is people think about it as what you see. And then I think the other thing that has maybe conflated it, as at least as long as I've been in tech, is you've also had the rise of customer experience as a function. And so you talk about customer experience as helping think through the customer touch points and the messaging and how you're sort of handling customers at different part of the journey. And then you hear UX and you're like, but wait. And so I think again, the word salad, I think we all confuse each other because we constantly change the names of these functions and what they're responsible for, and what the outcomes that they're delivering to are.
Well, totally. And also in a lot of corporations or a lot of companies that you'll work at, they'll have like a customer experience team, which is in one space, and then you'll have a user experience team that's in another space, when they should be working together. They should be like this, and they typically tend to like be completely separate departments.
Right.
Yeah. So Jessica, we have, like, to me, we like have this opportunity to talk to an operations leader like yourself. And as UXers, you know, let's say, you know, there's a UX designer or maybe a product manager like listening to this podcast. I think one thing they would say is, how do we get almost like a partnership with someone like you in the operations department? What would I have to say to get you to partner with me, you know, with, like, let's say a new feature or something that would need to be redesigned, and we would kind of need to like maybe clean out the code base or something like that. When you've worked with you know, product strategy, how are those conversations? What was that like just like a fly on the wall, just when you had like a good rapport with a product manager or UX designer?
Yeah, it's so funny you asked that question, because I feel like I might be not your standard ops stakeholder, because I have sat so closely to product marketing and development when I've worked at really early stage companies. And
Yeah.
so I feel like early in my tech career, I grew a great appreciation and empathy for what product development and UI UX brought to the value proposition. And so for me, I think that comes a bit more naturally. Like, am I always a perfect partner? Probably not, but I have a more open ear, and I have empathy for the user. And so I have a strong desire to develop the like most optimal user experience across the spectrum or across the user journey as possible. But I think when you're talking to the business side in general, people are interested in like, what is this going to do for me or the organization? Or how is this going to drive more customers and therefore more dollars? Or how is this going to save time, money, margin? And so I think when you're translating from the technical or product side of the house, or even the UX side of the house, you have to be able to use the terms or the metrics or the verbiage that people on the business side are going to care about. So if you're saying, okay, bringing us in will solve this problem, which is causing 40 support tickets a week, and if you actually invested in this,
Yes,
you know, I think those are the things that really enable strong partnerships. And I think that goes both ways. But again, like I said, I'm probably a poor use case here, because I've sat so close and I've seen the value accreted to paying attention to UI UX or strong product development.
you're just a convert. We love them. We love a good convert.
Yes.
Well, it's also
I've also sat in the product seat, so
it's almost
A
interesting.
couple of things, Brian, I think just to kind of mention, because of the 40 tickets, right? Like you mentioned, almost like these tangible examples. So, you know, as a UX designer, instead of talking about this is inefficient. We should talk. 5 minutes were lost for tasks. It impacted 200 employees. And those 200 employees close out 3 tasks per day. And so the calculation of 3,000 minutes per day lost equates to 50 hours a day of a team, fighting the product, right? That's, I think, what Jessica is really kind of getting at, is we need to speak in layman's terms so that we have a broader audience that can really come on the train, right, on the bandwagon with us to get us to that strategic table as well.
Well, yeah, and it's almost as though kind of like what we're talking about, and part of the challenge that the UX community has in trying to broaden the way that they can speak to people is that will help create fewer dead products, so that these folks are able to like get it in gear sooner, so that they're not creating and so they're having those discovery cycles, and they're having their like fail fast and learn cycles sooner rather than later.
I think with that, as a UXer, let's say, you work at a company, you are, let's say, working on a product that maybe is a feature factory. So let's define feature factory versus, a place that is kind of working on the most important things. Usually a feature factory has a product roadmap. They're looking at competitors. They are anytime a competitor has a new feature out, the first thing this company does is they take that new feature and implement it into their stack. So with that, Jessica, if this employee, this UX designer, let's say UX designer, product manager, because I want to not deviate too much from like the product org. If they're wanting to maybe get away from being this, copy and paste type of company, how can they work with operations to almost as a partnership to get more of the other departments in line, like sales, marketing, the C-suite?
It's a good question. I'm pausing a little bit to think about it. I think some of that's like being open to a listening tour, and telling people that you are trying to gather better perspective about what they're hearing, seeing, experiencing, both internally, but also from customers. And then from there, being able to also understand both their incentives and motivations, but also getting closer to what the customer incentives and motivations are. And if the goal is to stop being, I guess, what you're calling a feature factory, where you're just sort of like churning out new features just to catch up, versus like truly redefining the category or creating some sustained competitive advantage, I think then it's building the case around thinking bigger, shifting strategy. And of course, like depending on where you are in the product or UX org, you might have to influence upwards as well. But I think it's like finding your sphere of influence and stakeholders across the various departments and getting champions. And like, I think it goes back again to how is everyone defining value, and how is the organization, like what are the organization's objectives in the next 12 months, in the next 2 years, and how does what you're trying to do help get there faster? And so it's a little bit of a like listening and sales tour, right? If you want change like that, you've got to figure out sort of the slow but steady way to affect that change, especially if you're in like a larger enterprise. You're not just like going to go to the salesperson and be like, hey, we like that feature's not going to do anything. We need to do something bigger. But that salesperson's telling you that like 5 customers, are asking for that thing yesterday. And so there's like a tension there. So I think it's like breaking down those barriers and then finding a collective path forward that helps get the organization in a better place. And it's not just about you, Eve, or you, Brian, thinking like we should be prioritizing something else over the 5 features in the backlog.
Absolutely, because this copy and paste culture that we come from, Jessica, what do you say is almost making other product, like it's like we're looking at the same products but with different names. So you look at Facebook, Instagram, right? You look at TikTok and YouTube. And sometimes I'm scrolling through there, doing a little doom scrolling, and I'm actually not sure what platform I'm on.
Right? Because they've all copied each other, all of their features, to the point that if you don't know if you're on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok, because they've all done the vertical scroll videos with the likes and the comments and the hearts and the going live and all the other things, right?
Yeah,
Right,
the
it's
difference
just-
is how good the algorithm is on the back end.
Yeah, the recommendation piece as to what the for you, right? Like I think TikTok has done a pretty good job of doing.
Yeah.
So you were asking, like, basically, how do you start to combat, or just go, like, what would be your advice around for those product folks, or for those feature factory companies or founders who are like starting a product and they're trying to catch up to another platform? What is the best way for UX professionals or UX consultants to kind of combat that feature factory FOMO that these people get locked into?
Yeah, I feel like I sort of just answered that question. I don't know that I would have much more to add, other than the fact that if you look at the world today, the barrier to entry for like building product and the cost to building product has gone down significantly. And so if you want to win, you really have to figure out how you are delivering something different, or you are delivering a better capture for the users you're competing for. And so that doesn't just come from that takes, time and research and thought, and AI can help you do that stuff faster too. But I think the one thing I would add is, like, it's even more important today with the commodification of everything, that you're really thinking through how you're creating a wedge and a unique value proposition, and that you're actually like adding value, because that's how you then accrete revenue. And so that's one way to combat this as well. Like just churning out features. Like, so what, like, why is a user going to care? I think it's with like, maybe it's like with the jobs to be done framework. The whole concept behind that too is like, people aren't hiring, like people are hiring a product to do a job. So like, what is that job the product is doing, and how important is that job to the person? And you better make sure that you're developing a product that has a very strong job to be done, because otherwise it's just gonna be part of the rest of what's out there.
It's so
Right.
interesting. I've always found the jobs to be done framework to be very hard for folks to understand within UX, within product, let alone external from UX and product. Like that's just, I've found that to be like a kind of a hard thing to grok. The one thing that I would love to know your take on, Jessica, is I think one of the big capabilities that UX folks have that they can offer founders is to kind of play the bad guy and kind of be the person that says, no, don't do this. And
That's
save
my
them
job.
That's true.
Yeah,
If you
but I
get
feel like,
pushback, you get pushback from operations all day long.
and that's I feel like that's our job as well. Like our job is also to say no, don't do this. This is not the way to go. How do you think? So my question is like, how do UX folks and consultants and people that are looking for roles within new founders and startups, how should they be able to start selling themselves as those people?
Yeah, so I would first veer away, and I joke because saying it's my job to say no, but like I would veer away from being at any startup being the person who is known for just saying no, but is known as the person who can really help dial in focus and execution around what really matters. And so all day long at a startup or even at a scaling organization, you've got visionaries and big idea people who have that's that's what they're really good at. They're really good at coming up with lots of ideas to throw out and things to think about, and they're in front of the customer and they're hearing all this stuff from the market. But I think as key stakeholders to the decisions around what the organization is going to pursue, product or otherwise, it's our job to reflect back on, okay, how have we as an organization defined the strategy? And if that's not well defined, like that's a problem. And then how have we also as an organization defined our focus for the year and for this like 90-day quarterly cycle? And do all these ideas that are flying at us fit into that construct or not? And if they don't, ask a bunch of questions to understand, well, should it? Should we pivot? Should we be changing or should we not? And we need to put this on the backlog, and having a healthy debate around that. But it's not just about saying no. It's about what is in the best interest to executing against the strategy and helping us win in whatever way we are trying to win. Or saying, maybe we do need to go in a different direction. And if we do, here's the argument for it. Or, hey, I've heard you and I've thought about this. And like, these are the reasons I actually believe in what you're saying and think we should move in this direction or we should build this thing. And we got to get other people bought into this because the way we thought we were supposed to go is like now no longer the path. And so I think it's all about focus and also thinking beyond yourself and thinking more of the collective we as the organization and what the organization is trying to accomplish, and the problems it's trying to solve for its respective industry, market, humanity, whatever it is.
Yeah, so I think one thing too is I want to maybe talk about how should UX plug into like product and engineering, like so that things don't slow down, right? Like I think that's one thing, you hear a lot, and I think maybe even founders, like I want to take this from like a startup operations standpoint, is, oh, if we add like a designer or a UX person into our workflow, how does stuff not slow down, in quotes?
Yeah. I don't like the last organization I was at internally, had this concept, whether it worked perfectly or not, is another conversation, but like had this concept of core groups. And like the core group, especially on the technology side of the house, were those key stakeholders across like product, technical product, engineering, and design, maybe QA, that like were meant to be in lockstep on everything that was going on from a roadmap execution standpoint. And so the instilling the right cadence and communication channels and just sort of the integration of those stakeholders as a core group who collectively was, accountable to certain outcomes or delivery on the roadmap made it more of a team effort versus, hey, bringing someone else into the fold is just going to slow everything down.
I like that. Yes.
Now, again, I think there is, there is an evolution even in the last 2 years of how teams are staffed and, what's being done by our humans and what's being done by our AI overlords and agents and et cetera. So I think a lot of this is all evolving, but I do think this concept of there are core stakeholders or core capabilities that are required to effectively develop product and bring it to market. And how do you make sure that they're all working together, even though there's always going to be natural tensions there. But that, that actually increases velocity by having those people consistently working through these things, then slowing it down.
Yeah. And I think when you mentioned tension, I think tension is actually really good between product and sales and marketing and, other orgs and like operations. So let me ask you this. Maybe people are wondering, how do you translate UX work into something a COO can defend, let's say, inside the boardroom?
Yeah, that's another good question. I do think it sort of wraps back to translating what you are building on the product side and what you're delivering to the customer into the metrics the board cares about. Boards care about increasing shareholder value and are governing the success of the company. So can you translate what you are doing from a product perspective into how that is going to increase shareholder value? If so, it's much easier for all those investment line items underneath. This is what our roadmap looks like, and this is what we're developing to get passed through or get a stamp of approval by the board. I think where anyone will fall down, whether you're trying to sell what you're doing to a CFO, COO, CEO, chairman of the board, is if you can't effectively tell that story. It's all about the storytelling and the proof points and using the language that someone on that side of the house is going to understand, but then also be willing to put their neck on the line, especially if you're talking about the C-suite of the company, their neck on the line out to their key stakeholders, which are the bosses, the board and the shareholders, to say, like, I can really hang my hat behind this.
This is so key. Sorry, Brian, I want to ask another question here, because I think if a COO or just anyone in operations is watching, where does UX reduce operation risk the most, in your opinion?
Oh, I don't know that I have the right answer to that question.
I mean, yeah, just in your perspective and your previous experience, because I think that, like, understanding you better helps us, like with the storytelling and just helping with, again, we're partners here. We're all working for the same company.
Yeah. So I think good UX around the right problem solution set can help drive more customer adoption and pull through, right? So like, if you're solving the wrong problem, no amount of UX is going to solve that. But if you're solving the right problem, I think good UX can help with adoption, retention, lifetime value of your customer, brand affinity, all those things. And then I also think, going back to something I said earlier, is I think good UX can minimize headaches with customers. And so there's less overhead on your support teams or your finance teams or, that sort of stuff, because you're delivering a seamless experience, such that you're reducing that, internal overhead to support your customer base. And then, on the revenue side as well, it helps sell the product itself. So your salespeople have, I think there's a lot of threads you could pull there. I think most importantly, you have to make sure you're solving the right problem for the right people and that you have a product people want. And then I think there's a lot from an operational perspective that UX can assist with.
I love, this is gold. This is gold right here. I think, you know, us showing how poor UX, when it's done poorly, how it shows up in operations costs is huge. And so getting that script right, I think really delivers like an importance to what our department can give to a company. And then I think it's a natural partnership with operations that sometimes I think we're blind to see.
Except I now have to throw a wrench into this whole conversation.
Let's go. Let's go.
Well, I mean, half of the premise of this very show has been often there's tension between what user needs are versus what financial needs are. And Erica Hall, it's from an article that she linked, which was about Tesla, which there's stock surges on Elon's lies despite disaster. And she says, an excellent exhibit as to why I don't care for arguing the value of design research based on ROI, worth reading. To the extent that business success depends on making investors believe something is something counterfactual or speculative, and then understanding the real world only gets in the way of the story. To the extent that the business success depends on understanding real world conditions and creating user/customer value, then you have to look at the totality of influences on understanding and decision making organization wide. ROI sounds like something that should relate to the sound business thinking, but it's mostly a thought terminating cliche used to make it seem like the person deploying the term is aligned with the investor class. If you're advocating for users and customers or employees or the community or stakeholders, you're typically in a bit of opposition.
That's
And
a
that's a big problem.
landmine to go down.
But that is
Thanks,
like,
Erica Hall.
so it's very easy for UX folks to go in and say yes or say there's a different solution or play nice with a lot of these folks. But like if you're actually truly advocating for users and advocating for human beings, well, I mean, poisoning the river can be very, very profitable for a company, but not so good for the village down or the road that's drinking the water.
I'm not going to go. I feel like this could be its own podcast topic in and of itself. But yes, I think,
know.
like
Wow.
optimizing for shareholder value doesn't always yield, optimal results for each human being. I get, I think is what we're getting at. And I think I don't know. I'm going to pause there on that.
No,
topic.
it's a great question. Like, because that's, like I said, that's the whole basis of the show.
Capitalism. Yeah. Well,
I mean, that's part of the problem is that both things, you both want to be able to make money, but you also want to reduce harm. And oftentimes, Eve knows that I have this sketch, which is it's two UX people, and it's like everybody in the room is all like in the business, is all like representing the business, and all the people representing or the business are saying to the UX people, think about the business. And it's like the only two UX people are the only two people in the room that are supposed to be advocating for the human beings and for the users.
So maybe what we could say or how we could pivot, because I think there is, we talk about a partnership by almost what we're doing is giving operations a human lens and then really like delivering on that, right? Like how do we help employees close tickets faster by reducing, friction, the number of clicks within an interface. That's great. Not only is operations happy, we're happy, the employees are happy, right? So I think there are there are instances where we are helping each other make a better product. However, I think what maybe Erica Hall's point is the dollars. When we're only looking at the lens of money to be made. Then I think that's when we get, we start to ruffle feathers with each other and we start to really butt heads
Oh, yeah.
because we're not looking at it from multi-angle. We're only looking at it from a single lens, and that's profit. And that's, I think, where things start to unravel and create, the disasters that we've seen with mergers and acquisitions, and how operations departments are really just seeking for profit examples. And that's where Skylanders, great toy and system failed because they just kept pushing out new stuff, and then the kids were like, I want the new stuff, and the parents are like, I already bought you like stuff a couple months ago, I can't keep buying this. So you were ruining that brand value because it wasn't sustainable for the end user, right? So, and many examples, that's just one. So I think maybe where we could pivot is, why do why do some companies invest in UX and still see no business impact?
I mean, it could be a whole host of things. I mean, going back to like, are you actually solving the right problem and delivering what either customers need or customers don't know they need but will want if you put it out there? So like, are you solving the right problem? And I think also defining what business value is. Business value can be a number of things. Like, are you investing in UX but not seeing revenue growth? Are you investing in UX and not seeing margin improvement? Are you investing in UX and not seeing a higher net dollar retention? Like what is the business value that is lacking? And also, do you have the right people in the right seats? It could be, you might be investing in UX by having more resources, but are they the right resources working on the right things? So I think there's a ton to unpack in, we're investing here, but we're not seeing business impact. I don't know that it's a easy answer.
Yeah, I know it's a little complicated, but it is I think maybe, unless Brian, you have other questions, I have like one kind of final question that can kind of package stuff.
Oh, I have one question I'd love to ask as well. Because Jessica mentioned vibe coding, and I was curious to ask. No, it's because it was a really good question. And one concern that I have, or one thought that I had that maybe I would love to hear your answer is, so a lot of these founders, they're going to have ideas that they're going to throw into the chat GPTs and in the world of vibe coding, and we know a lot of these AIs are just kind of like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let me make this thing for you. Have you
Everything's
seen that?
a good idea.
Yeah, everything's a good idea. Have you witnessed that, or has that made anything difficult for yourself in dealing with any founders or any types of business folks that you've talked to who've been like, I want to, make I don't know, soap flavored snow cones or something. And the AI has been like, yeah, great, wonderful. And
I'll take this through the lens of an app I recently vibe coded.
okay.
And keep it from the perspective of like, I am someone who is I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to product development and user experience, but I am not an expert. So call me slightly above average.
Okay.
And it's actually been a wonderful learning experience, but I had an idea. I had an idea about what I wanted the feature set I wanted the product to include. And I was sort of going at it from something that's like a personal challenge for me, which is like booking group travel.
Okay.
And I went about writing the requirements, and I took some detail and time into saying like all the things as a user I would want this app to do and all this sort of stuff. And let's say I've spent 15 hours on it. I've gotten it to a place where I've actually user tested it with 20 people. It's workable, but what I've learned is, you know, anyone can go in and try to like build something right now, but to really put the finesse and the scalability on it, and also for someone to think through all the pathways is still challenging. And so and even after I've iterated and thought that I figured out all the different edge cases, like I change one thing and it changes something completely different down here. And so if someone has unbounded time to figure this out, they can figure it out. You could build all day long, but time is still a very scarce resource. And so what's like the best use of your time? And in my case, like the best use of my time was getting to a good enough prototype that I could then like get in front of real humans to go end to end through a experience and watch what they do and get the feedback and actually figure out where the aha moments were. But I know very well that if I want to take that app further, I will need to bring in expertise beyond my current level of expertise when it comes to either UX, engineering, you name it, because I'm not going to spend 40 hours trying to figure out how to solve these things that are still buggy or glitchy or bothering me or others as a user when they go through this. And that's because like the highest and best use of my time and expertise is not to keep building there. It's to bring someone in who could really help me get it to where it needs to be. So I think the vibe coding, I think the rapid prototyping is like awesome from the perspective of like 2 years ago, I could have never come to a product team or never come to a UX team and said, this is what I'm thinking about, and this is roughly what it should look like. And these are the things I know are messed up, but like, this is what the happy path should be. Like, I couldn't visualize that for people. And I think it's super powerful that now you can actually get from that 0 to 1 on your own as a non-technical person. But I still think there's limitation to how far you can take it if you actually want to make it a consumer grade scalable product. Now, I don't know if I'll ever take this app to the masses, but if I did, I know I probably wouldn't do it myself. And I would enlist people I know who are experts in UX, product, and engineering to guide me. And maybe it won't cost me as much because I've gotten, you know, further along than I would have otherwise. But I feel like I would bring the right people in to actually make sure I'm delivering on the product promise or, you know, the value proposition.
Do you find that the edge cases through your testing, or did you find it through the vibe coding?
Both.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So like a good example is like, I found a lot of stuff through the vibe coding because before I even would test it with users, I would go through the different user flows. I'd be like, oh, why did this change when I changed this thing? Or that's not how someone should go through this. It should serve this next in this screen. So I found a lot of it, but even like my assumption on how most users would actually start the user journey was completely wrong. And so the first time that a user got on the landing page, the first button they clicked was the button I thought would be the last one they clicked. And so I spent way more time optimizing for a different flow and then realized some of the flaws that still existed in the flow that, you know, 8 out of 10 of the people ended up taking when I actually put it in their hands. So I think that's another thing that's super important is like, we are all in our echo chambers, right? And we are all in the like, we're building this thing and we would do it this way and that's how the user is going to do it. But like, until you actually get people using it, whether it's your friends or even better, strangers, you know, like until you actually get it in the wild, you actually don't know You can make really strong assumptions and have really strong hypotheses. But I think that's also why it's really important to think through the different paths someone would take, both the happy and the anti-happy path, because again, I had an assumption that everyone would go one way and it was completely wrong.
Yeah, so then with that, what's one thing you wish every founder understood about UX before it's too late? Let's say, they're like a year or two in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I would advise like all founders to do just generally is, again, like make sure your product is getting out of your echo chamber as soon as possible. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good in terms of like the perfect polish when you're MVPing or alpha or beta testing or whatever. Because I think the longer you're in your echo chamber and the longer you're just trying to perfect every piece of this, the longer it's taking you to build a feedback loop, which is actually the most important thing to evolving the product experience or the user experience to the way that your actual users are going to take it and run with it.
Well, I think this was a awesome talk with an actual COO and someone who even has in my mind you sit with like a founder's hat on. So I feel just really good that is like practical advice for our audience. Brian, do you have any other questions? Anything to add?
No, this was awesome. Thanks so much, Jessica, for joining us.
Yeah,
this
thanks
is
for having me. This has been fun.
Right.
I love it. And if we want maybe to get you on again, we'd love to
Yeah.
have you. I think that there may be more questions that our audience might send us over, and we might want to get you back on.
Questions at uxmurdermystery.com.
All right, you guys. Well, we'll see you later.
Like, subscribe, and follow, or become our next victim of bad UX.
UX Murder Mystery is a joint production of Eve, User Experience Design Agency, and CrowleyUX, where systems meet stories. It's hosted by Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Edited by Kelsey Smith. Intro animation and logo design by Brian J. Crowley. Music is by Nicholas Lee. You can follow us at UX Murder Mystery. You can email us at questions@uxmurdermystery.com. UX Murder Mystery is a copyright 2025, Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Thanks for listening.